Our last topic looked at concepts, theory, and technologies for cloud computing, and that topic is a very important topic that you should pay your attention to closely. In this topic, we look at cloud computing services and platforms. You will note that this topic is fairly shorter compared to last topic, uh, but it is important that you realize what cloud computing services exist and make sure that you can identify them as offered by various service providers. So, in this topic, we will be interested in the cloud reference model and also the ability to map the cloud service model and the service types and categories into the cloud reference model. We are also interested in looking at the various types of computing services and the key features of each type or category of cloud computing service. We will also look at example services provided by various cloud providers such as Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, but we will not particularly study Amazon, Google as such. We will just look at the types of services that are provided out there without necessarily discussing a particular vendor. However, in the tutorial, you are required to study a particular cloud service or a particular type of cloud service as offered by the various vendors such as Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. Of course, these are the well-known companies, but they are not the only ones that provide the cloud. For instance, Oracle is a big provider. The same with Amazon, IBM, and so these three are listed here mainly because they are quite popular and quite common. Right, now let's start by looking at the cloud reference model. In other words, this model is fairly what you will find in every provider. They will be, they will, in other words, a cloud provider is part of the cloud model, and also there is a cloud consumer as well as a broker. The broker, and of course there is a cloud auditor who will look at what each one of those provide later, and also cloud carrier. Notice that the cloud provider normally provide quite the entire infrastructure. That's why in this diagram you see that the areas of responsibility are quite massive. In this case is providing the cloud itself, that of course could be accessible via the cloud carrier such as the internet. So notice that of these of there are basically four services that the cloud provider should provide. For instance, service orchestration, cloud service management, as well as security and privacy, of course. Under service orchestration, there is a service layer. The service layer is very important because this is where customers are saved. There is a resource abstraction layer and control layer. Very rarely do users interact with this layer. There's also a physical resource layer. Also, very rarely the users interact with that. But that's these are the three layers that are part of the service orchestration. And notice that the physical resource layer has got the hardware and of course facility. When we talk of facility, we might be talking of a particular location where they provide a data center. Right, the cloud service management is where the cloud provider would support businesses, and also they provide automatic provisioning and configuration, as well as of course portability and interoperability. Notice that security and privacy are very important for the adoption of the cloud. Without security and privacy, it is inconceivable that cloud consumers would use the cloud. So the cloud provider usually provide security and privacy as part of the core component, right? So the consumer, normally you make use of the services that are provided in the cloud, whereas the cloud broker provide service mediation, in other words negotiation of better service between the consumer and the provider. Also service aggregation, service arbitration are also part of the cloud broker. Now, an important role which is emerging recently is the cloud auditor. The cloud auditor ensures that the cloud is secure, and also there is privacy impact audit, where they try to determine the impact of a breach, and then performance audit. All these come under the cloud auditor. Of course, the cloud carrier becomes very important to support all these aspects. This includes the internet. This model has been provided in NIST Cloud Computing Reference Architecture, which is available, of course, as a PDF online. Right, now let's look at the cloud service reference model. Right, notice that the cloud service reference model is already part of the cloud reference model, because under orchestration we have the service layer. So with which are the aspects that we are looking at here. So it's really the cloud service reference model, which is part of the cloud service layer on the cloud reference model. Now notice that here there are three services, types of services that you might encounter. For instance, if these are obviously layered, you can see that. So at the bottom most we have networking, then storage, servers, then visualization. I think it is not the first time that we have covered something similar to that, the cloud architecture. Of course, visualization, you can then install operating system, you have middleware, runtime, data, and applications. So if it's on premises, if in other words an organization providing everything for themselves, this is the on premises. In fact, the user then becomes responsible for all that. Now, where the provider only looks at networking, storage, servers, and visualization, we call that infrastructure as a service. And where the provider takes care of the runtime, the middleware, the OS, visualization server, and then this one is called platform as a service, because you already have a runtime. Typical examples are, you could have a Python runtime that already is already available there, and it's in other words everything, all the layers are supported by the provider up to the runtime, and the user is only responsible for applications and the data. Now, where the provider is responsible for all these layers, then what we have there is software as a service. Right, notice that as you move from on-premises to software as a service, there are lower operating costs, and as you move from software as a service to on-premises, you get more flexibility because you are more and more in control. Right, here are examples of cloud service reference models. Notice that the lower down the stack the cloud provider stops, the more security you are tactically responsible for implementing and managing your stuff. For instance, here Salesforce offers software as a service, and whereas Google provides platform as a service because it runs up to runtime. time. Then Amazon EC2 instances is basically Amazon provides only up to virtual machines. EC2 is simply elastic cloud compute service. That's where the C2 come from, cloud compute, CC. So it's, in a way, it's ECC. And so in this case they provide visualization, and you can run any virtual machine on top of that. So Amazon is a little bit lower down the stack. So the lower down stack the cloud provider stops, the more security you are technically responsible for implementing if you are a user and using one of these services. Right. Now let's look at how do we map cloud service types into the cloud reference model. As you have already seen, here we have security, which we assume of course include privacy there. So there we have identity and access management services. Most vendors provide this under security, and that also covers privacy. Now in the application layer, normally the application layer comes as it is, of course. Then when you come to the service management layer, that's where you have deployment and management services. And in the platform and middleware layer, this is where we do find quite a bit. We have first of all analytics, application services, then networking, and also storage. Naturally you then require also compute services. Right, that is on the virtual machine. Mainly you would have storage services, because even virtual machines need to be stored on the hard drive or some sort. So it is natural that the service that is attached to virtual machines is the compute service as well as storage services. Now when you come to the visualization layer, we basically normally that layer of functions without necessarily a service associated with it, without the virtual machines layers. Right. Now when you talk of compute services and storage services, you also talk of hardware. So there is the hardware layer also incorporates some of these. And of course lastly we have the infrastructure layer. Right, now that will be the end of section 2. In section 1, in section 2 we will look at compute services.